king's ambition. The pages of history tell us of kings and rulers, of plagues, famines, and wars. They speak of empires rising and falling, of heroes and villains, and of the relentless march of time. But some events are too terrifying, too dangerous to be recorded for future generations. Hidden away, erased from the annals of history, lies the tale of the dawn of the werewolf, where the Lycan curse enveloped the lands. A curse so potent, it was stricken from memory to prevent its recreation. In the heart of medieval Europe, a new kin arose, his name whispered with reverence and fear across the continent. King Cedric, a man of iron will and unparalleled ambition, sought to unite the fractured kingdoms under a single banner, his banner. From the lush valleys of the south to the frozen north, Cedric's armies marched, conquering all who stood in their path. His dream of a united realm drove him, and one by one the kingdoms fell, bending the knee to the relentless force of his vision. But there was one territory that remained unconquered, a land not registered on any map, known only in hushed tones as the Dark Lands. Legends spoke of this place as a realm of nightmares, a cursed domain where no man who entered ever returned. It lay between Cedric's newly acquired kingdoms, a dark blot on his otherwise pristine map of conquests. To truly unite his empire, Cedric needed the Dark Lands. In the dimly lit war room of his grand castle, Cedric stood, surrounded by his most trusted advisors. A massive table lay before them, a detailed map of the continent spread across its surface. Cedric's eyes were fixed on the uncharted territory, his expression one of determination and curiosity. "My lord," began Alistair, the oldest and wisest of Cedric's advisors, "we must speak plainly about the Dark Lands. They are not like any other territory we have encountered. The stories..." "Stories," Cedric interrupted, his voice commanding and impatient. "Superstitions and myths meant to scare children. We are men of reason, not frightened villagers." Alistair bowed his head slightly, choosing his words carefully. "Sire, the tales of the Dark Lands have persisted for centuries. They speak of wolves that walk on 2 feet, creatures of immense strength and ferocity. These Lycans, as they are called, cannot be killed by mortal men. Those who have ventured into their realm have never returned." The room fell silent, the weight of Alistair's words hanging in the air. Cedric's gaze did not waver. "I have faced countless foes and emerged victorious. I will not be deterred by ghost stories. The Dark Lands are the key to uniting my kingdom, and I will march into them myself if I must." The advisors exchanged uneasy glances. They knew their king's resolve was unbreakable, but the Dark Lands were a different matter entirely. "Sire," another advisor, Sir Gregory, spoke up, "if you are determined to march on the Dark Lands, we must prepare with utmost caution. We should gather all the knowledge we can about these Lycans and their weaknesses, if they have any." Cedric nodded, his decision made. "Then let it be so. We march at dawn. We will conquer the Dark Lands and bring them under our banner, no matter what monsters lurk within." As the advisors dispersed to make the necessary preparations, Cedric remained, staring at the uncharted territory on the map. A chill ran down his spine, but he dismissed it as the thrill of impending conquest. He had faced death and danger before, and emerged victorious. This would be no different. The first light of dawn saw Cedric's army assembled and ready. The king, clad in gleaming armor and astride a powerful steed, led his men towards the ominous horizon. The Dark Lands awaited, a shadowy realm of legend and fear, soon to be illuminated by the fiery ambition of a king determined to unite the world under his rule. As the army marched forward, the winds whispered through the trees, carrying with them the ancient secrets of the Dark Lands. Cedric, undeterred, pressed on, his heart steeled against the unknown. Little did he know, the true test of his reign was about to begin, and the curse of Lysanor awaited him, ready to change his destiny forever. King Cedric stood at the front of his army, his eyes fixed on the dense dark fog that enveloped the Dark Lands. His advisors, faces pale with worry, approached him tentatively. "Sire," Alistair began, his voice trembling with urgency, "we beg you to reconsider. Allow us to set up camp at the edge of the Dark Lands and send in the elite troops to clear a path first. It would be folly to march the entire army into such peril without knowing what awaits." Cedric's gaze remained unyielding. "We must move forward. The land must be ours." "Please, my lord," Sir Gregory implored. "The risk is too great. Our elite knights, the Order of the Iron Wolf, have never lost in battle. Let them forge the way." Cedric paused, considering their words. His desire to conquer was fierce, but the wisdom of his advisors held weight. With a reluctant nod, he agreed. "Very well. We shall make camp here. Send in the Iron Wolves." The camp was swiftly erected at the edge of the Dark Lands. Cedric watched as the Order of the Iron Wolf, a group of seasoned warriors known for their bravery and unmatched skill, prepared for their mission. Clad in gleaming armor and bearing the emblem of the wolf, they marched resolutely into the dark, foggy woods. Hours turned into a day, and then another. No word came from the knights. Anxiety grew among the soldiers, and even Cedric's resolve began to waver. Suddenly, a commotion stirred at the edge of the woods. Out of the darkness, what was left of the Iron Wolves came charging, battered and bloodied. Half of their ranks had been lost. One of the knights, Sir Roland, stumbled forward, his face ashen and eyes wide with horror. Cedric and his council gathered around him. "Speak, Sir Roland! What happened in there?" Cedric demanded. "Sire," Sir Roland panted, "we encountered creatures. Wolves that walk on two legs, hundreds of them. Their ferocity was unmatched, their power unnatural. It was as if they had the devil himself on their side." Cedric's expression darkened. "How many of our knights were lost?" "Half, my lord," Roland replied, his voice breaking. "And how many of these wolf creatures did you kill?" Roland hesitated, his face stricken with despair. "None, sire. They cannot be killed. I managed to stab several, but it had no effect. They are unstoppable." As the last of the knights retreated from the woods, Cedric began to don his armor, a determined fire in his eyes. "I will face them myself." "No, sire," Alistair objected. "We cannot lose you to these beasts. Your life is too valuable." Just then, a strange figure emerged from the woods. Half man, half wolf, the creature stood tall and imposing. "I wish to speak with the king," it growled. The council moved to block his path, but Cedric stepped forward, bravery shining through his frustration. "I am King Cedric. Speak." "I am Daren," the wolfman introduced himself. "We simply wish to be left in peace. Should you enter our lands again, I will not be as merciful. I will kill all who enter. You are a brave king, but you are powerless here. Leave us in peace, and no one else needs to die." Cedric's anger flared at this apparent challenge to his power. "I will take this land for my kingdom. It is a scar on these lands and must be healed. I, King Cedric, swear it." Darian's eyes flashed with a mix of sadness and warning. "Then you sentence your armies to death." With those words, Darian turned and disappeared back into the woods, leaving King Cedric seething with frustration and rage. The dark fog of the Dark Lands seemed to mock him, its depths hiding the terror that had claimed his knights and threatened his ambitions. Cedric knew then that his conquest would not be as simple as he had imagined. The true test of his reign had begun, and it was a battle against forces beyond his understanding. Days had passed since the disastrous foray into the Dark Lands, and King Cedric's mood had only darkened. Back in his kingdom, he stormed through the corridors of his castle, his rage a tempest that none could escape. His staff trembled under his wrath, and his generals and advisors bore the brunt of his ire. "We are but insects to these creatures," Cedric bellowed during a council meeting, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "They cannot be killed. To send in our armies is to send them to certain death. I am a king without the power to rule my lands." Days turned into weeks, and Cedric's anger only grew more volatile. He shouted at his servants, belittled his generals, and dismissed the advice of his most trusted counselors. The defeat at the hands of the Lycans gnawed at his pride, a wound that refused to heal. Then one evening, news of a strange visitor reached the castle. The man claimed to possess knowledge on how to defeat the Lycans and sought an audience with the king. Desperate for any advantage, Cedric ordered an immediate meeting. Night had fallen when Cedric took his place on the throne, his patience worn thin. The doors to the great hall creaked open, and a figure stepped inside, his presence shadowy and unsettling. The stranger approached, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "I am Thorn, a healer of sorts," the man began, his voice calm and measured. "I know many secrets of the Lycan, in particular, how to defeat them." Cedric leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Tell me, man, before I have you strung up." Thorn smiled faintly, unperturbed by the king's threat. Now, that's no way to speak to someone who can help. Now is it? I will tell you, but I wish something in return." Cedric's eyes burned with impatience. "Name it." Thorn produced a crude map from his cloak and spread it on the floor, pointing to a small, insignificant piece of territory. "This," he said, "it is not in the way of any of your trade routes and would not be missed from the map. Nothing happens there." Cedric's advisors shifted uneasily, exchanging wary glances. Alistair, his voice filled with concern, spoke up. "Sire, we should consider this carefully. We know nothing of this man or his intentions." But Cedric, consumed by his need to defeat the Lycans, dismissed their concerns with a wave of his hand. "I will hear what he has to say." Thorn continued, "I simply wish a small piece of land for me and my people to live in peace and be left alone." The discomfort among the advisors was palpable, but Cedric's mind was made up. He could not afford to pass up any chance, no matter how small, to gain an advantage over the Lycans. "Agreed," Cedric said, his voice resolute. "You shall have your land. Now tell me, how do we defeat the Lycans?" A sly smile spread across Thorn's face as he began to share his knowledge, the dim light casting long shadows on the walls. The pact was sealed, and with it, a new chapter in Cedric's quest to conquer the Dark Lands began. As the night deepened, whispers of the deal echoed through the castle. Cedric's advisors could not shake the feeling of unease that lingered long after Thorn had left. Yet Cedric, driven by his burning need for victory, felt a glimmer of hope rekindle within him. The battle against the Lycans was far from over, and he would stop at nothing to see it through to the end. King Cedric's command resounded throughout the entire kingdom. Create weapons and armor of silver. The order was clear and unwavering. Every blacksmith, from the smallest village forge to the grand workshops of the capital, was instructed to halt all other work and focus solely on producing silver weaponry and armor. Every ounce of silver, from the coins in people's homes to the ornamental trinkets in noble estates, was seized for the king's cause. Foragers scoured the forests, mountains, and riverbeds, gathering materials for the smelting of silver. An entire kingdom was galvanized into a single purpose: to arm itself against the Lycan threat. Weeks turned into months as the fires of the forges burned day and night, their glow illuminating the relentless effort of the blacksmiths. The air was filled with the rhythmic clanging of hammers, the hiss of molten metal, and the acrid smell of smoke. At long last, the fruit of their labor was revealed. Swords, arrows, spears, and armor for men and horses, all forged from silver, gleamed under the sun. The weaponry was magnificent, a testament to the kingdom's unity and determination. Each knight, soldier, and warrior was issued silver arms. The metals shine a symbol of hope and resolve. King Cedric stood on a balcony overlooking the grand courtyard where his army had assembled. The sight of thousands of warriors clad in silver was awe-inspiring. The sun's rays reflected off their armor and weapons, creating a dazzling spectacle. Cedric's heart swelled with pride and anticipation. "With these weapons," Cedric declared to his advisors, who stood by his side, "we shall defeat the Lycan once and for all." His advisors nodded, their expressions a mix of hope and trepidation. The memory of their last encounter with the Lycans lingered, but the sight of the silver-armored army filled them with a renewed sense of possibility. The call to march was given, and the silver army moved out, a shimmering tide of determination and courage. Cedric led the way, his own armor gleaming, his silver sword at his side. The ground trembled under the weight of the marching soldiers, the sound of their unified steps echoing through the land. As they approached the edge of the Darklands, the once intimidating fog seemed less ominous in the face of their newfound strength. Cedric's eyes were fixed on the horizon, his mind set on the battle to come. He was determined to conquer the Darklands and vanquish the Lycan threat that had plagued his kingdom. The Silver Army marched on, their hearts steeled by Cedric's unwavering resolve. The Darklands awaited, but this time Cedric and his men were prepared. The battle between man and Lycan was about to resume, and with their silver weaponry, they hoped to turn the tide in their favor. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a silvery glow on the marching army, King Cedric allowed himself a rare smile. The future of his kingdom hinged on the success of this campaign, and he would stop at nothing to see it through. The silver army of King Cedric stood poised at the edge of the Darklands, the fog swirling ominously before them. Cedric raised his hand, signaling for silence. He surveyed his troops, their silver armor gleaming in the dim light. With a voice that carried strength and determination, he addressed his soldiers. "Brave warriors of the realm," Cedric began, his voice resonating with authority. "Today, we stand on the brink of a new era. Beyond these woods lies a land shrouded in darkness and fear, but we are not here to cower before it. We are here to conquer it, to bring light where there is shadow, to bring peace where there is chaos. Remember, it is not just our weapons that make us strong, but our courage, our unity, and our unwavering resolve. Today, we fight not just for land, but for the future of our kingdom. Forward, my brothers, into the Darklands." A resounding cheer erupted from the army, their spirits lifted by Cedric's words. With a determined stride, Cedric led his troops into the fog, the dense woods closing in around them. The march was arduous, the forest thick and foreboding. Every step seemed to echo with the whispers of ancient legends. Then, as they reached a clearing, they came face to face with a formidable sight. A large group of Lycan warriors stood before them, their eyes glowing with feral intensity. The creatures were terrifying, their hulking forms a testament to their deadly prowess. Without hesitation, Cedric raised his sword and shouted, "Charge!" The silver weapons hit their mark, decimating the Lycan army. Arrows flew and swords slashed, each strike causing the Lycans immense pain. The Lycans, who managed to avoid the initial barrage, found themselves helpless against the onslaught of silver. The battle was brutal but one-sided, and Cedric's army emerged victorious with very few casualties. Cedric's eyes burned with a bloodlust, his mind focused on a single purpose: destroy the Lycan. No mercy, no quarter, no retreat. He ordered his army to move deeper into the woods, cutting down any Lycan that crossed their path. The army of silver marched through the dark lands like a wave of death, leaving none spared. Finally, they arrived at the main outpost of the Lycans, a den-like structure, more primal than any castle. As they approached, a familiar figure emerged under a white flag. Daren, the half-man, half-wolf. Darian's eyes were filled with sorrow and defiance as he spoke. You have slaughtered my people for land. All we asked was for peace. For hundreds of years we have never left the lands of Lycan, keeping our people in peace. Your greed has forced you to slaughter us like cattle, using ancient knowledge of our weaknesses. Why would you do this if you are a king of peace? Cedric's expression remained stern as he replied, "A king must conquer to bring peace." Daren's gaze pierced Cedric's soul. "How did you know of our weakness?" Cedric answered, "A healer by the name of Thorn has aided our cause. He is a hero to our kingdom and these lands." Darian's eyes widened with realization. "You have been misled. The one you call Thorn is an elder, a vampire, parasitic and evil. Lycans live in peace for one purpose, to keep the elders in check. What you have done here today has doomed your kingdom. For once we are gone, the elders will go unchallenged, taking anything they want. There are no secret weapons to kill them. Only the Lycan can do that, and you have removed us from this task. I wish you well, King Cedric, but you have doomed your people and your kingdoms. Your only hope is to pray to Lycan that he may aid you." Cedric, angered and believing Daren to be lying, ordered his knights, "Kill him and any survivors." With a swift execution, Daren and the remaining Lycans were slain. The Dark Lands were conquered, and Cedric's army emerged victorious. Days later, the kingdoms celebrated their triumph. Huge parties and festivities broke out across the nation as the lands were united under Cedric's rule. Laughter and music filled the air, and the people praised their king for his strength and leadership. But as the celebrations continued, an uneasy feeling lingered in Cedric's heart. The words of Daren echoed in his mind, a nagging doubt that refused to be silenced. Cedric stood alone on his balcony, looking out over his jubilant kingdom, wondering if the cost of victory had been too high. On a small, secluded piece of land at the edge of Cedric's kingdom, a group of elders, ancient and powerful vampires, made their way to the new lands, invited by the mysterious healer, Thorn. Though Thorn had now vanished, the land was dark and foreboding, as if cursed by his very presence. Thorn had left clear instructions for the elders. Wait until Cedric defeats the Lycans, then take the kingdom. The elders waited patiently, building small hideouts to retreat to during the daytime. Barely a few weeks had passed when troubling reports began to reach Cedric's ears. People in the kingdom were falling ill, weakened with small puncture marks on their necks. Many had died, their bodies mysteriously disappearing, while each day more and more were reported missing or sick. Cedric's advisors reminded him of Daren's ominous words. One advisor spoke gravely, "If these are the creatures Daren spoke of, none of our weapons will work. We will be helpless. Days passed, and the situation worsened. The number of missing and sick increased from all corners of the kingdom. Cedric's once mighty army was dwindling, knights and soldiers succumbing to the strange illness or vanishing without a trace. Each morning, the kingdom awoke to the horrors of vampirism, a plague draining the life out of the realm. The elders' sightings swarmed in each day, like a parasitic spectre drinking the kingdom's blood. A darkness descended over the kingdom. Cedric, in his castle, damned himself for falling for healer Thorn's trick. The words of Daren echoed in his mind. Your only hope is to pray to Lycan, that he may aid you. Determined to save his people, Cedric jumped astride his horse and sped off towards the Dark Lands. No one had entered these lands since they were conquered. He galloped through the woods to the heart of the Dark Lands, where a shrine adorned with strange symbols awaited. Cedric dismounted and fell to his knees before the shrine. Lycan, I have been misled by my pride and by another. Please aid me. I will give you my life, my soul, for the safety of my people. A strange, half-man, half-wolf creature approached Cedric. Cedric looked up, his heart pounding. Daren. The creature shook his head. No, I use this image as my true form would be too much for a mortal. I am Lycan, god of the Lycan. You slaughtered my people out of greed. Why would I help you? Cedric's voice trembled with desperation. I have lost everything I fought for. I was wrong. Me, not my people. Take my life and save my people. Lycan, guised as Daren, stepped closer and scratched Cedric's arm. Blood trickled down, but the wound healed unusually fast. Now you bear the curse of the Lycan. When the moon is next full, you will become one of my children forever. Each person you spread your curse to will also become one of my children. When your job is done, you will return to the Dark Lands forever. Cedric felt a strange power coursing through his veins, a mingling of fear and hope. He knew his fate was sealed, but he had one purpose now: to save his people, no matter the cost. The chapter ended with Cedric standing at the heart of the Dark Lands, transformed and determined, the weight of his choices heavy on his shoulders. The fate of his kingdom now rested in the hands of the god he had once defied. Cedric returned to his castle, only to find it barren and desolate. The eerie silence was broken only by the sound of the wind whistling through the empty halls. No living soul could be seen. His heart sank with the weight of his failure and the devastation that had befallen his kingdom. But then, a single thought pierced through his despair. His son, born some months ago and kept hidden from the world, his son was the last hope for his lineage. Without wasting a moment, Cedric sped towards a small shack, hidden away from the castle and any prying eyes. It was a place known only to a few select and trusted friends. As he approached, his heart pounded with both fear and hope. Bursting through the door, Cedric found his loyal friend, Sir Alistair, standing guard. In his arms, wrapped in a simple blanket, was Cedric's infant son. The relief that washed over Cedric was overwhelming. Alistair, Cedric said, his voice thick with emotion. You have done well. Alistair nodded, his expression a mix of concern and loyalty. What is your command, my king? Cedric reached into his cloak and pulled out a heavy purse of gold. Take this gold. Leave the kingdom. Take my son to safety, far from here. Tell no one of his father or his lineage. Swear to me you will protect him. Alistair's eyes widened in understanding and resolve. I swear it, my king. Your son will be safe. Cedric handed his son to Alistair, his heart breaking at the thought of parting with his only child. He is the future. ensure he lives free of this curse, free from the shadows of our past. Alistair took the child, his grip firm and protective. I will guard him with my life. With a final, heartfelt look, Alistair turned and sped off into the distance, the weight of his new responsibility clear in his determined stride. Cedric watched them go, his heart heavy yet hopeful. He knew his friend would fulfill his promise. As the shack's door closed behind them, Cedric turned back towards the castle, the burden of his destiny pressing heavily upon him. He had given his all for his people, and now for his son. The fate of the kingdom may have been sealed, but the future of his bloodline was now in safe hands. Alone once more, Cedric steeled himself for the battles ahead. His transformation was inevitable, and with it came a new purpose. The kingdom needed to be cleansed of the vampire plague, and he would be the one to do it. Lycanor's curse was both his punishment and his redemption. As he walked back through the empty halls of his castle, Cedric knew he would fight with every ounce of his newfound strength, for his son, for his people, and for the hope that one day peace would return to the land. The night of the full moon had arrived. As the luminous orb rose high in the night sky, Cedric's body began to convulse. He cried out in pain as his form twisted and contorted, bones cracking and reshaping. His transformation from king to werewolf was excruciating but inevitable. When the change was complete, he stood on two legs, a fearsome beast, and let out a primal howl that echoed through the land. With supernatural speed, Cedric ran towards the lands of the elders, alone but determined. As he traveled through small settlements, he saw the elders attacking his people. Without hesitation, he dispatched the vampire invaders, his new Lycan strength overwhelming them. After each encounter, he bit the remaining settlers, transforming them into Lycans, his army growing with each passing hour. Throughout the night, Cedric's ranks swelled. By the time they reached the lands of the elders, they were a formidable force. The territory was dark and terrifying, a place where life itself seemed drained. The very air was heavy with malevolence. Like wild animals, Cedric and his Lycans tore through the safe houses of the elders. The vampires, once confident in their dominion, found themselves powerless against the Lycan onslaught. The purpose of the Lycan was clear: to keep the elders in check, and Cedric executed this task with meticulous precision. They destroyed hundreds of elders, their screams piercing the night. Many fled in fear, never to be seen again. The battle raged on, a relentless purge of the parasitic vampires that had plagued the kingdom. As dawn approached, the lands of the elders were littered with the remnants of the night's destruction. Cedric had either killed or banished all of the elders. The morning sun rose, casting light on the devastation, but Cedric did not change back to his human form. He was now doomed to the Lycan curse forever. Cedric led the remaining Lycans back to the Dark Lands, where they were greeted by Lycanor, now in his full, godly form. Lycanor's presence was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. "You sought to conquer this land," Lycanor spoke, his voice resonating with power, "but you have been its destroyer. You sought to bring peace, but have brought nothing but suffering and pain. You sought to save your people in a last bid for salvation, but you have now doomed them to the curse of the Lycan. Your name will be removed from history, so no one will ever follow in your stead." As Lycanor's words echoed in the air, the lands began to regrow. Nature reclaimed what had been lost, and society slowly recovered and bloomed, without the interference of those who sought peace through conquest. King Cedric, once a mighty ruler, was forgotten, his deeds and his name erased from history, a silent testament to the cost of pride and ambition. As the world moved on, the Dark Lands remained a place of balance, a reminder of the thin line between power and ruin. Cedric, now a creature of the night, led his Lycans into the depths of the Dark Lands, a ghost of the past, destined to guard the balance he once sought to destroy. The legacy of Cedric. Cedric's son grew up far from the shadow of his father's deeds, living a peaceful and happy life. The small, hidden village where he was raised became his sanctuary. As the years passed, his lineage continued, each generation living in blissful ignorance of their heritage, free from the curse that had once threatened their bloodline. Generations came and went, and the descendants of King Cedric spread across Europe. Their lives were marked by prosperity and happiness, untouched by the darkness that had plagued their ancestor. By the 1600s, one of Cedric's descendants, a man named Alexander, lived a contented life in Eastern Europe. Alexander was a humble farmer, known for his kindness and dedication to his family. He lived with his wife Katerina and their newborn son in a quaint village nestled in the Carpathian Mountains. The night of his son's birth was a joyous occasion. As Katerina held the baby in her arms, she noticed a peculiar mark on his small back, a pentagon, the mark of the wolf. She brushed it off as a strange birthmark, something unique and insignificant. Life continued in peaceful contentment. The villagers admired Alexander's family, unaware of the ancient lineage and the curse that lay dormant within the newborn child. One evening, as the moon rose high in the sky, Alexander sat by the fireplace, his son cradled in his arms. The light of the flames danced across the room, casting shadows that seemed to whisper of forgotten secrets. Katerina looked on with a smile, the love for her family evident in her eyes. But the mark on the child's back was no mere coincidence. The curse of Cedric had been biding its time, waiting for the right moment to resurface. The number of descendants since Cedric, the cycles of the moon, and the alignment of ancient prophecies all culminated in this very child. As the firelight flickered, Alexander noticed something strange. His son's eyes, which had been a bright blue, were now a deep, unnatural red. Small, elongated teeth began to show through the baby's gums, sharp and foreboding. Katerina gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in horror. "Alexander, his eyes!" Alexander held his son closer, a chill running down his spine. The child, now squirming in his arms, let out a small growl, a sound that no human infant should make. The prophecy had come to fruition. The Lycan curse had been reborn, hidden within the lineage of King Cedric. The erased history and forgotten legacy had led to this moment, the curse emerging once more after centuries of dormancy. Alexander and Katerina had no knowledge of the ancient curse, their lineage, or the dark past that had been stricken from history. They were innocent victims, caught in the resurgence of a centuries-old malediction. As the realization dawned on them, the fire flickered, casting a brief image of a wolf's shadow on the wall. The curse had found its way back into the world, ready to unfold its dark legacy once again. The child, with his red eyes and sharp teeth, signaled the beginning of a new chapter in the saga. The day of the werewolf was coming, and the world would soon face the resurgence of the ancient curse, reborn in the unsuspecting lineage of a forgotten king. The story of King Cedric and his descendants was far from over. The legacy of the Lycan would continue, bringing with it the promise of darkness and the hope of redemption.